Hi, I'm Corey Driver, and this is Moving Forward. So this week we are in 1 Kings 3 and Matthew 13, and we are talking parables. And boy, are we ever talking parables. This is the good stuff, I feel like. All too often, we skip over the words and the ministry of Jesus. There's lots of talk about incarnation, and then there's lots of talk about death and resurrection, and then a little talk about ascension. As the late, great scholar of, Jesus, Yaroslav Pelikan reminds us, Jesus lived. And he taught, and frequently the creeds, like the things that we say to contain and hang our beliefs of Jesus on, skip over Jesus's whole life and whole ministry, and that is unfortunate. The early church did not, which is why we have the Gospels. What Jesus said and did is central to who Jesus is. And so this summer, especially in year A, we just really dig into Jesus's teachings. And this is the good stuff, right? This is some of the best stuff. And so it's exciting to be along for the ride and simply hear what the Messiah said and did, and what Jesus taught. So glad you're here. So Jesus, the Messiah from God in Galilee, talked a lot about the kingdom of heaven. And indeed, Jesus' ministry seems to center on the kingdom of heaven. Why? Why not just say, hey, here's some, basic Christology. Here's what you need to know about who I am and my death and my resurrection. Jesus seems to spend a lot of time talking about this kingdom of heaven that is at hand, that is somehow already and not yet, that is here, is right at hand, but is coming in a more powerful way yet. What's going on with the kingdom of heaven? What can we say about the kingdom of heaven? The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that is small and inauspicious, but when it starts to grow, it's got takeover possibilities. It will spread out all over the place, and it will give home to the birds of the air, those things that don't necessarily have homes unless somebody or something else creates them. The birds of the air find their place in the mustard seed. The kingdom of heaven has ample place for people. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast, a tiny little amount of stuff when mixed with about 50 pounds of flour changes irrevocably the whole batch. The kingdom of heaven has something like takeover possibility. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field that a man buries again, perhaps somewhat foolishly, and then perhaps somewhat wisely, goes and sells everything that he has and acquires the field and the treasure therein. The kingdom of heaven is of surpassing worth that sometimes people have difficulty distinguishing from the context in which it's found. The kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. When the merchant finds one, he goes and sells everything and acquires it. The kingdom of heaven is trying to acquire. And when the kingdom of heaven finds what it is looking for, it will spend everything to acquire it. That is astoundingly good news, that the kingdom of heaven is after you and me and will not stop until it gets what it wants. The kingdom of heaven is like a dragnet. Now, do you know what a dragnet is? It is a net that is dropped, usually by a couple boats, out in the water, and then either the boats pull a line to shore, or the line was simply on shore the whole time, and people start pulling. And a dragnet pulls up everything. It sits on the bottom, it floats on the top, and everything as it is brought toward shore comes up with the net. The kingdom of heaven is like a dragnet that scoops up everything in its path. And Jesus says at the end, the angels will separate out the bad fish from the good and throw them away. Just in addition to last week, this is another reason why we don't really hold to the rapture ideology, because Jesus here says, quite frankly, that the bad fish are taken out first, and then leaves the good fish. The kingdom of heaven is like a dragnet that scoops up everything and brings in everyone. These teachings are familiar to us, but maybe not quite familiar enough. A lot of times we think the kingdom of heaven is nice. It means God's, somehow present, but not quite fully. The kingdom of heaven here is on the move, just as mustard will take over a garden and indeed take over a field if you let it get out of hand, just as yeast takes over a batch of bread, just as a merchant will buy the pearl. That's the sole goal of the merchant, is going out and looking for pearls, and will get it at the opportunity, just as the dragnet captures everything. The kingdom of heaven is on the move. Now, a lot of times, especially recently, we'll hear talk about the kingdom of heaven. And I think this is a nice corrective because it centers the people and the work of the kingdom in making a holy community. Sometimes, though, I think the pendulum swings a little too far that way. And we lose sight of the king for the kingdom, and that might be part of the goal. However, in these parables, there's sovereignty issues at stake. The kingdom of heaven is looking to acquire. The kingdom of heaven scoops in everyone, every kind of fish that may or may not like to be scooped up. This is the kingdom on the move. The kingdom is run by the great king, not by the kin. And that is important to keep front and center. Jesus has a very, unsurprisingly, very strong doctrine of God at work with agency in the world, doing things and spreading the kingdom. Now, lest the pendulum swing too far that way, we need to say the kingdom of heaven is not Christendom. It is not a human-run theocracy. That's sort of the opposite of the point. The kingdom of heaven has one king, and it isn't human, it's God, right? God is in charge of the kingdom of heaven, and the kingdom of heaven is on the move. And God, who we know to be gracious and slow to anger, and not willing that anyone should perish, and full of everlasting love, is the king who sits on the throne of the kingdom of heaven. It is not us. It's not any other human who's in charge of the kingdom of heaven. Far be that from reality, and happily it is. God is in charge. When Jesus tells us what the kingdom of heaven is like, Jesus also tells us what the king of heaven is like. Moving slowly, but taking over, staying close to the ground, like a mustard seed, like yeast, like something that is worth everything, and something that thinks that we are worth everything, that is on the search for pearls and is happy to sell everything and acquire one, that brings in everyone and everything. Right? The kingdom of heaven is a kingdom on the move. It's not us. We're not in charge. We can't say that enough. This is not a human theocracy. This is not Christendom. This is God's movement sweeping in folk who might be surprised, right? This is the kingdom of heaven, and this is the really good news, that the king sits on the throne and the king is good. And yes, the kin are all invited, and it is a family affair, but make no mistake, it is a kingdom of heaven that Jesus teaches us about, and therein teaches us about the king.